Who's ready to go to Egypt? Good morning. This is Stuff I Find Interesting. You have to say it like that, otherwise it doesn't count. It's a Monday morning. I've gotten a lot done already, actually, which is pretty cool. I can goof off and do stuff like this. So this is actually, I guess we could call this a special edition episode because it's kind of different than the others. I'm going to be talking about the Sphinx. You know, the great Sphinx. I should be specific. The Great Sphinx. Because there are lots of different Sphinxes, but there is only one Great Sphinx. Now, why am I talking about the Sphinx on Stuff I Find Interesting as a whole ass special edition, which is going to be really long? Because a lot of people are talking about it, you know, and when people start talking about stuff, I get curious and I start to wonder, like, okay, well, what's really there? Where do these ideas come from? Is there any basis to this stuff? What's the side that goes like way too far one way? What's the side that goes way too far the other way? I try to look at it all to try to just understand for myself, you know, because I find it interesting. And then I figure, well, if I'm doing this endeavor, which is like part of a normal Saturday night, I should probably save it and like talk about it on Stuff I Find Interesting, right? I mean, it is kind of like my hobby. And this is how I become interested, and this is how I follow, you know, the various threads. So, there's been a lot of talk out there on the conspiracy subs. This is an older series, but I recently saw it. Doesn't really talk about anything new. There's this guy from Bright Insight, which is a YouTube channel. It's decent. He's also a veteran, so we can watch him. He's okay. He's got like 2 million followers. I got like what? How many do I have? 435? Something like that. Anyhow, he does like conspiracy stuff, and he talks about the Pyramid of Giza and these pyramids that have recently been discovered that were previously debunked and said not to exist. And his work is based upon probably this work, where, let me go to the spot. If we go to right here, so if you have enough money, you can do anything in Egypt, basically. So these guys went where they're not supposed to, because they paid somebody a bunch of money and said, listen, we want to see, you know, what's going on. This will be in the link so you can watch the whole thing. But there's just like one specific spot that I want to show you, and that's this spot right here. Let's make this bigger. So as you can see, there's a hole. There's some sort of a shaft. Can't really tell from here where the shaft is. Looks like a modern pole holding the whole assemblage up. So now let's go to where somebody actually climbs into this thing. Where is that? Where does this dude climb in? Here it is. Yeah, it's the most replayed. Look at that. So there are a couple of different shafts, and I'm going to talk about those. And some of those might lead to the Hall of Records, where all of knowledge is contained. Or it might be something that was dynamited by somebody to try to get at treasure that they thought was inside. So there's a whole lot of different shafts. So here we have this fella, who's very handsome, by the way. If I must say so. But why would you wear white doing that? Man, you get all dirty. So there's just more of the shaft, and then that's really kind of as far as it goes. Then they kind of get out of there. So private entry into the Sphinx. Kind of misleading, though, because you can't see how far it goes. Looks like there's an end. So is it really I mean, it is kind of a hidden chamber, but it's more of a shaft, really, than a chamber, I would argue. But, that's just me. Okay. So, let's talk about the Sphinx just a little bit before we go through a photo album of the Sphinx's greatest hits. And, no, it's just some pictures I thought were cool. And this woman has done, I don't know that she's done like a dissertation or something, but there's an impressive amount of work here that's on the ground and based in books and based in previous expeditions, blah blah blah. So there's some stuff here that's pretty good. So first, the Sphinx follows the golden ratio. It's Fibonacci'd, so that's kind of cool. There is an inscription on the right paw. The inscription on the right paw says, "This structure is the work of the immortal gods, placed so as to dominate this soil of land of harvest, built in the center of a cavity from which they withdrew the sand, like an island of stone in the vicinity of the pyramids so that we can see it. Not as the Sphinx defeated by Oedipus, but as a sacred servant of Leto, who guards with vigilance the sacred guide of the land of Egypt." Very cool, right? So we go a little bit further, and maybe you knew, maybe you didn't know, I didn't know, there was water around the Sphinx. So the Sphinx had water around it. We can see from here how there's sort of like a, where water would have been. Interestingly, also, close to here, there used to be a lake or an inlet of water that led into the larger body of water, the Nile being the larger body of water. And that allowed them to take the stones from the quarry and get them to where they needed to go in a quicker manner than, like, say, hauling them across the desert for however far away it is. I think I have it in here somewhere. So there was something else I wanted to talk about in this specific. I think I really just wanted you to see that picture. So this picture really shows you kind of what we've got going on, a lot of history, a lot of stuff here. And when exactly was this thing built? That's another thing we're going to talk about. Oh, this is what I wanted to bring up. There is a stele called the Inventory Stele. I might be saying that wrong. Which calls into question the Sphinx and the dating of the Sphinx. In addition to that, some argue that there was weathering of the Sphinx that is indicative of a much older structure. In addition, there is another camp of people that believe the Sphinx was carved and then carved again. So we have different kind of things, going on here. Now, the Inventory Stele is, some people think it's a hoax. They think that it's not real, and that it was done to sort of cement the power of the people that were talking about this and using this as a, look how powerful, look how great I am. So I'm kind of guessing on that, but it seems as though it has details that are anachronistic to the time of Khufu. So this is a whole thing you could download. You can read it. It's a limestone tablet made during 664 to 332 BCE to showcase a temple inventory of precious statues. It was a time when fragmented Egypt had been unified under Psamtik I and had made independent from Assyrian rule. The stele was discovered by Auguste Mariette in 1858. I probably will come back to some of this stuff a little bit deeper. Right now, we're skipping stones across the head of the Sphinx, but in a gentle way, so we don't hurt it. We don't want to hurt it. Here's our buddy Antonio Beato, brother of Felice Beato, famous photographer. And we can go biggie. We can see people sitting here. Kind of cool, right? So this is a drawing of what what it was perceived had. And it's interesting. Mostly all of the pictures that you see are the same, modern and not modern. You have people posing kind of in front of the thing. Haha, look at me. I'm in front of the Sphinx, and people sort of gathered around. Usually there's someone that's like on top of this thing. In this particular picture, there doesn't appear to be anyone on top of it. I don't know the original date of this. I'm guessing 18 something. Here we have some soldiers. Very popular photographic backdrop for soldiers. This is a before excavation. You can see it's still all covered in sand. And it's looking west. Here we have another picture. We have a man who's praying. I would think that if that would be a pretty hot picture for the time, right? Like I'm praying in front of the Sphinx, and I got a picture of it. Although it might have been, the photographer was the one who arranged the whole thing. I don't know. Okay, I'm getting way too far, of course. Stay on topic, Laura. Stay on topic. First photo ever taken of the Sphinx. I don't think I can make it very big. That's as big as I can make it, because this is dumb. Oh, no, I can make it bigger. But as you can see, not really a whole lot to see. It looks like there's like some hole over here. Probably some explorers coming in, checking it out. Now, this is a dancer from 1862, and she's doing like interpretive dance in front of the Sphinx. So you can read more about that if you want. Miss Olive Hosmer on camel at Pyramids, Egypt, about 1900. She lived a very long life. She traveled around. She never got married. That's all I found out about her. Here we have pictures of the Sphinx all day, every day. You can go crazy. I think there's 144 photos, something like that. There's a lot, but you could sip your tea or whatever, your hooch, and you could check out some of these pictures. The reason why I include this is because there are people that may want to study them more closely than myself, right? Like everything I'm offering here, someone could take and absolutely probably go like a lot deeper with it, and kind of jump off whatever dregs I've sort of pulled together from other people. So if anybody wants to piggyback off of any of this, please feel free. I'm all about the truth, man. All about the truth. Here's a rarely seen kind of angle from the top. You can see the little sort of hole there. Supposedly there's a hole there, there's a hole there, and there's a hole on one of the flanks, but I forget which. I guess it must be this side. Here we have some more images, and this is a whole thing that you can look at. He has a big old hole in his face. I've never seen that before. This is William Matthew Flinders Petrie, one of the explorers. He wrote a really large book about it. I think I've attached the book as a PDF if you want to check it out. Very exacting man in terms of how he proceeded. He wasn't like careless, This is him when he was younger. Looking pretty much about the same, setting up his photography. So this is pretty hot. He knew archaeology. He knew anthropology. He knew how to photograph stuff. He was able to travel. He was able to live in harsh conditions. He was able to get along with like the local people. Like, that's fascinating to me. He's pretty much like a rock star, in my opinion. There's his wife, looking amazing as she descends into something. It's a great picture. I love that picture. That's a really good picture. Here's another picture, and I like this one because there's a dude on top. Hi, dude on top. I just love how when there's stuff, people are like, I gotta climb it. I gotta climb it. It's there, man. I gotta climb it. And I believe this is we're almost to the last of the photo album of the Sphinx. We're starting to get into the nuts and the bolts and the crannies. This is how they protected it during the war to try to keep it from getting its head blown off. Now, the Sphinx has appeared on coinage. Rulers have tried to represent themselves as a Sphinx, as sort of this mysterious protective, enigmatic ruler. And the Sphinx shows up actually quite a bit in numismatics. So if you're into numismatics, this is a really cool thing. When I had my own antiques collectibles business, I did a little bit of coinage, but it was usually the collectible stuff. It usually wasn't really cool stuff like this. Although this one time I did get this huge bucket of someone's collection of tokens. And there were like brothel tokens, whiskey tokens, old subway tokens. I mean, it was, look, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. It was amazing. Going through that was so much fun. I can't even tell you. Okay, we're getting back to the mysterious Sphinx. Okay, so this is interesting stuff, right? Okay, so we already looked at that. Now, this is interesting from like if you're a photographer or if you're an artist or you're interested in sort of the history of art or how art juxtaposes with archaeology, this would definitely be very interesting to you because it talks about the pioneers, the people that took pictures, how they took pictures, how they documented the monuments, the changes and improvements made in engravings of the site from the 1600s to the 1800s. It's an intense article, but the reason why I bring it up is because it has the explorers, the early explorers. Like we know some of the more famous ones, but who were the guys who went like super early? So the first explorer is George Sandys, 1578 to 1644. So in 1610, he was like, I'm going to travel extensively in the Middle East. And that's what he did. So he talks about the pyramids, blah, 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 blah. But then he says about the Great Sphinx, not far off from these, the Colossus doth stand, wrought altogether in the form of an Ethiopian woman, and adored heretofore by the country people as a rural deity. The next important explorer of the Giza Plateau to consider is John Greaves, who was a scholar. He was fascinated by the Great Pyramid. He read a lot. He read everything about it. He was like a big fan. He was like a big pyramid fan. And he was also an English mathematician, astronomer, and Orientalist, which has been popular on and off throughout the ages. It was popular in the 1630s, and then in the 1800s, it became popular again. So he wasn't. He was more of a tourist, but he's still sort of considered an Egyptologist because he was the first to measure the Giza pyramids, and he did that with like great accuracy, like very close. So you can read about kind of how he did that. But he said, what is the connection between the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx? On the east side of this room, there seems to have been a passage leading to some other place. Whither this way the priests went into the hollow of that huge Sphinx, or into any other private retirement, I cannot determine. So here we have an introduction to some intrigue. Is there something there? Is there not something there? Next we have Thomas Shaw. He was a religious guy, but he produced some really nice maps. He put together some books about the Sphinx. The sands were so far raised and accumulated about it that we can only discover the back of it, upon which over the rump there was a square hole about 4 feet long and 2 broad, so closely filled with sand that we could not lay it open enough to observe whether it had been originally contrived for the admission of fresh air, or, like the well in the Great Pyramid, was intended for a staircase. Allergies, man. So the other possibility, which he did not think of, would have been treasure seekers, trying to dig in a spot, trying to figure out a way to get in there. Next, we have another British explorer, Charles Thompson. He was a lawyer. He didn't really add a whole lot to this thing, except he said, before I leave this place, I must take some note of a colossus, at least the head of one. It is usually called a sphinx, which is a fabulous monster having the head and breasts of a woman, the wings of a bird, the claws of a lion, and the body like a dog. They likewise made use of it in their hieroglyphics to represent a harlot, intimating the danger of being captivated by the charms of a faithless woman, whom the fond lover in the end finds as cruel and rapacious as a lion. Tell me you got dumped without telling me you got dumped. Okay. Next, we have Frederick Lewis Norton. He was a Danish captain and traveler. He drew a lot, lots of engravings. And the work is very well known and highly regarded. His image of the Great Sphinx, which is this, is considered pretty ahead of its time. Following in Norton's footsteps were the savants whose work were published in the famed Description de l'Egypte. This was ordered by Napoleon Bonaparte. He brought with him 167 of the best scientists, engineers, and artists of France with him to document ancient and modern Egypt. The results of their meticulous and painstaking explorations were a major influence on Europe's view of Egypt. So then it talks about the whole Napoleon thing, and there are some engravings, which we're going to look at, that show Napoleon's people doing stuff that involves perhaps maybe going inside things. The expression of the head is sweet, pleasing, and tranquil. The character is African, a fineness of execution truly admirable. It is flesh and life. The art has without a doubt a high degree of perfection. Next we come to Giovanni Caviglia, and that's in 1816. And he came as an assistant to Henry Salt, who had just been assigned the Consul General of Egypt. He was also the financer of the excavations and the collector of antiquities for the British Museum. So probably an interesting guy to check back in with. So Caviglia owned a ship. He was very pious. He saw sort of the Sphinx and the pyramids as sort of this religious thing. But he was very meticulous. And he was the guy who started to clear the front of the Sphinx where the feet are, and start to understand that there was more to it than could be seen. He said that there was one other thing I wanted to show you. I think it was this here, yeah. So this is one of the stelae that he discovered. Oh no. And wait, there's one more thing I wanted to go over. And it was right here. It's in French. I can read French, but it's not coming up. I don't know. It's weird. Sometimes it does that. I know it wasn't really that important. Let's see. Hang on. Let's see how my French is. He discovered the stele with the song of Tutmosis IV, who was a pharaoh, who was the son in homage to the Sphinx. What? One more time. Nope. I don't know what happened. Very weird. Now, one thing I wanted to show you, of course, it's all the way at the freaking bottom. Ain't that always the way, guys? This is all about Egypt. So if you're like an Egypt freak, this is good for you. You'll enjoy this. This is what I wanted to talk about. Hang on, give me a second. My brain is short-circuiting. In the midst of all this mystery and confusion sits the gigantic figure of the Sphinx, smiling placidly and benignly and seeming to exult in the baffled curiosity of the bewildered traveler. The head and neck alone remain above the sand, a height of about 30 feet. The outlines of the face indicated to be a sculpture of much merit. And then it talks about some stuff. And then it says, on one of the paws of the legs, which stretched out 50 feet from the body, he found a temple. This gigantic figure, when fully exposed to view, must have been very imposing. A doorway is said to have anciently existed between the legs of the Sphinx, which gave entrance to the subterranean vault beneath, which formed part of the labyrinth chambers and galleries that traversed the earth between the pyramids. So this is written at the time by, I think this was one of the guys who accompanied Caviglia, but he like was keeping track of stuff. But he wrote this. So the pyramids of Giza, this is more for you to read. There was one thing I wanted to talk about, and it is Henry Salt, who fell in love with it, and his words inspired a lot of other people to say, I want to see this for myself. The contemplative turn of the eye, the mild expression of the mouth, and the beautiful disposition of the drapery at the angle of the forehead plainly attest to the admirable skill of the artist by whom it was executed. It is true that no very considerable share of attention is paid to those proportions we are accustomed to admire, nor does the pleasing impression which it produces result from any known rule adopted in its execution. On the contrary, the effect may be rather attributed to the unstudied simplicity of the conception, the breadth yet high finish of the several parts, and the stupendous magnitude of the whole. Such are the sentiments with which a repeated view of it has inspired me. At first, I confess I felt, like many other travelers, that the praises lavished upon it by Norden, Deeden, and others were exaggerated. But the more I studied it at different hours of the day and under various effects of light and shade, the more I became convinced of their having barely done justice to its merits. So, wow, right? So this was like catnip. This stuff like this was like catnip to explore dudes who were like able to like, to go off and explore stuff. So when Caviglia uncovered the Sphinx's chest completely, flights of steps were unearthed, and finally accurate measurements were taken of the great figures. There were stairs. You would go down. The height from the lowest of the steps was found to be 100 feet, and the space between the paws was found to be 35 feet and 10 feet wide. Here there was formerly an altar. A stele of Thutmose IV was discovered, recording a dream in which he was ordered to clear away the sand that even then was gathering around the site of the Sphinx. Okay. He also found some parts of the beard, which was thought to have been intentionally broken between the 3rd and the 10th centuries AD. We'll come back to that. So there's a whole, already we've got a lot of kind of stuff going on, and there are other people that have come after, like a lot of people. So it's a cultural lasagna. This is about the staircase. So this would be something that, now, even though this looks like it's going up, it says, according to what I read, that it goes down. Maybe someone can confirm that, if it's going up or if it's freaking going down. Because to me, it looks like it's going up. But this says it's going down. So, I don't know. But down here, it says entrance to a small room, the facade of which is covered with hieroglyphics. And then it points out wells or shaft descending from 3 upper chambers to 5 lower chambers. And, yeah. So we have 8 chambers, and then the entrance between the feet. 8 chambers. There's some more stuff that you can read, but now I want to move on. I don't want to get too bogged down in it, because this is like where we can come back if we want. I want to keep it moving. So we need to keep in mind that because the Sphinx is so old, it's been built upon and built around. This particular article discusses specifically the Roman alterations to the Sphinx, and it has some stuff that you can read, but I bring it up to point out, especially this picture specifically, to point out how confusing things could get and how difficult it is for archaeologists to parse out what's true, what's not true, what's there, what's not there, what was exaggerated, what was never talked about, what was talked about but we didn't know about. There's so many different aspects to this, and the more people that explore it, and the longer that time goes on, the more kind of confused it gets. So these are some really great photos. Now see, here are the stairs going down, right? Going down, stairs going down. Yeah, there's the stairs right there going down. Then you would have the water. I guess the altar area would have been protected from the water, or maybe not. I don't know. I didn't really get that far, but it talks about multiple periods intersecting, so you can look further. You can look further at that. Here's some of the graffiti that's been uncovered on the Sphinx, which is just interesting, kind of as an aside. We've got salutations, good fortunes to people, more good fortunes. It's for the eternal victory, blah blah blah. Adoration of Discorus, the stonecutter, and his children. So that's like a stonecutter snuck in some graffiti. Offering of Aragios, his wife, and their children. So again, this is a testament to the age of this thing and the history that is kind of foisted upon it. Now, I was talking about Napoleon's dudes climbing all over the Sphinx. These are the engravings I was talking about. So here you have some guy with a pole. We have a guy dropping a plumb line. We have a ladder. And it says, no door was found in the end, and the hole in the head was confirmed to conform to Colonel Coutel's report, which is there's an opening in the skull, which is 7 feet deep, and it was cleared. That's from someone trying to dynamite it. So there's a hole that goes in, but it's an exploratory hole. It doesn't appear to be a deliberate hole. Or does it? I don't know. The tales of tunnels, chambers, burials, and gateways appear to have temporarily laid to rest by Caviglia's investigations. So we're back to Caviglia, and he's like, yeah, nothing there. Just the stelae and this altar thing. In 1835, Sir John Gardner Wilkinson made a more moderate judgment of the hole in the head of the Sphinx, identifying it as an architectural feature that would have allowed a crown to be fitted to the monument in antiquity. The cap of the Sphinx, probably the Shent, has long been removed, but a cavity in the head attests to its former position and explains the mode in which it was fixed. I feel pretty satisfied with that, honestly. I don't know. This is the last thing I wanted to show you on this page, and this is what it's believed to look like. And this was based on an illustration by G. Braun. And at this point, and this is in 1914, the Jehovah's Witnesses are involved somehow. So I didn't even explore that part of it. But this is this was published by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, which is now known as the Jehovah's Witness Society, or just the Jehovah Witnesses. I guess there's no society. But you can read more about this. But this Braun guy wrote Scenario of the Photodrama of Creation. There's another thing I should probably come back to. But this is supposedly what it looks like. And then you have Edgar Cayce, right? Edgar Cayce's going into into trances, and he's talking about the Hall of Records, built by an Atlantean civilization of the Great Sphinx of Giza. His evidence were derived from a series of clairvoyant readings that were recorded from 1901 to 1944. Two further discoveries made in the 20th century continue to fan the flames of speculation, albeit in a much less dramatic fashion. So we have excavations by Emile Barraz and Pierre Lacau. Lacau. There's no. So Emile Barraz and Pierre, they left photographic record of what they uncovered, but sadly no former report of their discoveries. That's included here. It's something that you can look at. And the pictures are kind of shitty. They don't really seem to show a whole lot, but it looks like there's a cavity on the north side of the Great Sphinx, and this is a possible tunnel entrance on the south side. And then we have Mark Lenner, who is the next guy. He did this in 1979 or 1980 with Zahi Hawass, who you might know. I feel like Lenner and Hawass fell out or something happened, because Zahi was catapulted right into fame, and he's the face. When you think of Egyptologists, you can see the hat, and you can see him striding along. He's the face of Egyptology. When we think of, he's the one that's bringing us these new things that are coming out. Like there's a new shaft in one of the pyramids, I think. There's a new temple that's recently been discovered in the area, and I'm going to talk about that because it relates to the Sphinx. So it feels like this guy was pushed out. In fact, he didn't even publish his own report on this until recently. Like for 30 years, he didn't do anything with it. Why is that? It's very strange to me. I just feel like there's got to be something there. Here's another shaft, which looks like it might go down further. If the passage is in fact later than the whatever 8th dynasty, it rules out the suggestion that it was cut in the late or Greco-Roman periods when the Sphinx was already a popular focus of pilgrimage and even tourism. Otherwise, we might speculate that the passage is an unfinished tomb shaft cut into the Sphinx for the burial of some personage from the nearby Greco-Roman settlement of Busiris, mentioned by Pliny the Elder and evidenced by the Roman period material found in the excavations to the northeast just across the modern road from the Sphinx. But he says the way the passage winds down through the rear of the statue does suggest it is an exploratory tunnel. So he says maybe it was a tomb. Maybe it was both. Maybe it was a tomb and then it became exploratory. Here's some more stuff. This is what they call the rump passage. Now, remote sensing was done in 1987, and they reported evidence of a tunnel oriented north-south under the Sphinx, a water pocket 2.5 to 3 meters below the surface near the south hind paw, and another cavity near the north hind paw. In 1991, a team consisting of geologists carried out a survey of the Sphinx using seismic refraction tomography, and seismic reflection. The investigators interpreted their data to indicate shallower subsurface weathering patterns towards the back and deeper weathering towards the front, which they take to indicate that the back of the Sphinx and its ditch were carved by Khafre later than in the front. They interpret their data to likewise indicate subsurface cavities in the front of the left paw and left paw along the south flank. In 1992, Imam Marzouk and Ali Gharib from the Egyptian National Research Institute carried out a study of the ground below the Sphinx using shallow seismic refraction. Their evidence indicated the subsurface rock is composed of 4 layers and no faulting. They reported no cavities. And that's where we remain today. Or is it? So to try to put this to bed, there were people who said, wait. You know what we can do? We can carry out a geology survey, and we can map the Sphinx by strata. The names of the blocks, the different areas, how they were built, the order in which the blocks were placed, the quarry in which the blocks came from. So this is a whole thing. This is from 1979. This is part of that whole Lenner. But Lenner came back in 2016. He was back, baby. And he's the one who did this, which is also interesting, right? But he was funded by, let's see, uno momento. Maybe it doesn't say here. For various reasons, his dissertation lay unpublished and available only in substandard paper copy. The actual maps, drawings, photos, and notes and records behind that dissertation went into storage, but no longer. The ARCE Sphinx Mapping Project Archive is the world's first online data set to document the history of the masonry work on the Sphinx. So he is now the well-known president of the Ancient Egypt Research Associates. So again, it sounds like there's a little bit of peer-to-peer drama there. Oh crap! Here, I'll show you. This goes into it more. You can see, and it also talks about within those two reports, which I'll include, the repairs that were made. So there are areas that are documented as repairs and when they were made and how they were made. It does not really go into tunnel so much. It talks about that several lines of evidence hint at a very deep canal basin where boats could offload and turn around in a waterway enough for two-way traffic. I've never heard of that before, have you? I mean, I said it earlier, but I said it earlier because I learned it like on here. So this is another study. No, this is in addition. So this is like an addendum to the ARCE Sphinx Mapping project, and it talks about it more in like a sort of casual way with some photos. Talks about mapping it stone by stone. Hang on, let me see. Uh-oh, why will you not do that? Why will you not do for me? There we go. Look at that. I think I looked at this already. Tunnels under the ramps east of the temple. What you do is you take your keywords and then you can like go through here, and you can see if anything is there of any interest. So, not so much. But what is of interest is also the landing platform, which he goes more into, and his evidence of thinking why there was a very deep canal basin that was wide enough for people to offload, like guys with the quarry stones. This is the ARCE open context. I went around it a little bit. I not too much. You can poke through it. Maybe there's something of interest there. Maybe there's like you can actually see a tunnel in one of these pictures. I don't know. I went through it kind of picture by picture, and it's a little clunky to use, right? Because you go here, and then you've got the picture, but then like you can't really just immediately go to the next one. But that's not really what it's for. I mean, it's for academics, so you know I can't like bitch too much. These are more photos for you to look at. So before we keep going and talk about tunnels and mysteries of the Sphinx, what happened to the face of the Sphinx? Well, the face of the Sphinx between the 3rd and the 10th centuries. Sahim al-Dahir, in 1378. Egyptian peasants made offerings to the Great Sphinx in hopes of controlling the flood cycle, which would result in a successful harvest. And they had done this for eons, right? And a Sufi Muslim named Muhammad Sahim al-Dahir was outraged by it, and he blew up the nose with dynamite, and he was later executed. And talks about the evidence, why it's done by that dude, or something similar to what that dude did, and not blown off by Napoleon's armies, like taking pot shots, at it or whatever. So, believe it or not, we're actually moving into the end, and a lot of this stuff that you see here, like it looks really scary, but a lot of it is backup documentation that I'm just going to reference and point to and include so that it can be looked at if someone wants to poke further and build off of my stuff. So let's go back into controversy. So this particular paper is about the Sphinx being remolded from a much older monumental lioness. So I have my phone on so I can see when my husband comes home, because if he interrupts me and I don't know about it, I get mad. How do I have 6 messages? That's crazy. How did that happen? I'm very popular, apparently. This is saying that there was an ancient lioness under that was remolded into what you see, the Sphinx. And the evidence for this talks about the geological fissure through prehistoric lion monument. It's very interesting, and it should probably be read into further, like a lot further. But at this point, I started to kind of fade. I was kind of like, Sphinx. Like, literally, when I went to sleep last night, I saw like faces of Sphinx floating around in front of my head. It was crazy. So this is something that you can read. This is from 1889, Facing the Sphinx. Didn't really go into it. Archaeology of an Image, Great Sphinx of Giza, 487 pages of stuff. Didn't really go into it. 138 pages of more Sphinx stuff. Didn't go into that one. This is the one by Petrie. Remember the guy walking with the walking stick? This is his work, 157 pages. Didn't really go through that. And here we have the Oriental Institute, which is talking about excavations at Gaza. And it's an excavation that I hadn't heard of before. So I kind of saved this to come back to later. So here we are. We haven't really made any progress. So let's just take a break for a minute so I can share something amusing with you. There was a woman who fell when she was 3 years old, and when she woke up, she said that she lived a previous life and that she was an ancient Egyptian, and she became an Egyptologist. Probably more to the story there, but just that one random sentence jumped out to me. And they found cocaine on the mummies. So, there you go. Cocaine on the Mummies. That's my new band name. Cocaine on the Mummies. This is what is this thing? Honestly, I didn't go through this, but it talks about quantum computing, and it's a lot. My mind started to, but I think this one is one of those kind of far out there ones, and I think that's why I saved it, so you could like look at, having seen some academic stuff, then you could see some, some out there stuff. I'm pretty sure this is out there stuff. Let me see. I think I saw an illustration, and I was like, "Yep, out there stuff." Well, no, this is out there stuff. Either out there as in like woo out there, or out there as in like mathematics that I'm just not even qualified to begin to understand. I'm still working on fractions. So what's beneath the pyramid? Or underneath the Sphinx? And this is a Reddit series that you can read, and it talks about some of the links between some of these guys, and it talks about some of the stuff that I've already mentioned, but it gives a nice little sort of summary. Like, it's nice to read how other people put things together, because they might put them together better than myself. And indeed, this person does put it together better than myself. And yeah, how weird. I'm about to curse. How is it not weird as fuck that the only real video evidence we got from the shafts and the Sphinx are 40-year-old low-res 10-second clips in some documentary nobody knows about? I know the tunnels are mapped out. I know no one from the mainstream archaeologists are denying them, but why the actual fuck don't they just put a 4K camera with perfect lighting into those tunnels, show every little crevice, and be done with the doubters regarding the Sphinx for good? And maybe it's just me, but that tunnel Mark Leonard climbed through seemed way bigger than what a potential robber should should look like. Potential probably he meant Robert Hole. And when they filmed that big ass room from the Sphinx, I was honestly floored. That bitch is huge. How can they just show us a 5-second length clip of that? So I feel like information's being hidden. The archaeologists are gatekeepers. Someone in this is a post of the ARE, the same organization that did that geology study, and fascinating. I think this is the same YouTube video. Let me double check.
When it comes to citing sources,
is this? Oh, look, it's Bright Insight. Yeah, okay. So this is the guy I was talking about. I'll add him to this so that you can look at what he says. Because he's interesting, no doubt. So here's this guy, and he decides that he's going to take a giant leak all over the Sphinx. He says the Mystic Meg tendency has come back with a vengeance since 1994 when Belgian engineer Robert Bouval published the Orion Mystery. He claimed that the ground plan of the pyramid site at Giza outside Cairo maps the position of the constellation of Orion, not in 2500 BC, which is the accepted date for the monument, but much earlier in 10,450 BC. A year later, Graham Hancock's Fingerprint of the Gods updated the Atlantis myth with its argument that civilized survivors from the catastrophic end of the last ice age 12,000 years ago had passed their wisdom on to the cultures of the Near East and Central America. Sold 500,000 copies. And then he says, surely this is just harmless fun, a tangle of ripping yarns to keep the cerebrally challenged readers off the streets. Alas, the pyramid buffs take themselves very seriously and spin paranoid fantasies about their persecution by the academic establishment, and even, in one author's case, the CIA. So let's contest the best shot in their locker, the so-called rain erosion of the Sphinx. Hancock employed this trump card to Jeremy Paxson in a Newsnight discussion of the Atlantis myth last month. Since Paxson let it pass without a murmur, here's a briefing for him. And then it has a little bit of a discussion about why this guy doesn't think it's 10,000 years old. He thinks it's 2,000 years old. And he talks about, this crackpot crew flies under the flags of some of the most respected houses in the land. Viking Penguin bankrolls Hancock. Hodder funds Andrew Collins. Random House has just reissued Robert Teppel's The Serious Mystery, which purports to connect ancient Egyptian culture with visiting aliens from the Sirius star system. Temple believes that the pyramids and the Sphinx were probably built by the extraterrestrials themselves. This week, Macmillan launches Graham Phillips' Act of God, a bid to link the plagues of Egypt and the exodus of the Israelites with the volcanic eruption on the Aegean island of Thera around 1360 BC. So he's saying, what the heck? He's like, there's nothing there. We need to calm down with this nonsense. So we're done with it, right? There's nothing more to talk about. We've got 5 minutes left. And boy, do I have a doozy. Just a few weeks ago, they discovered an incredible smiling sphinx of a Roman emperor. So they just found this. They didn't know it was there. It's a whole other sphinx that they didn't know existed. And it's connected to the temple at Dendera, which is also known as the Temple of Hathor. And it's west of the Nile River, 30 miles north of Luxor. So it's kind of within the same, all the monuments of Giza, but it's not right next to the Sphinx. But it's kind of it's connected to the Sphinx, which is, I'm going to go into that in a second. So this is saying that the Temple of Hathor is built over an older structure. And the belief is because of a sculpture called what is this thing called? Dendera Zodiac. So this is a stone thing that's on the wall, and according to where the zodiac people are and the way it's lined up, it shows constellations in a way that they were 10,000 years ago, not 2,000 years ago. And therefore, there was a structure before that was 10,000 years old, and then it was built over when the pyramids were built. This talks about it a little bit, the rendering of it. It can be seen as one of the most surviving documents of antiquity, regardless of when it was made and how it was made. It's an incredible archaeological discovery. That's very, very important. But is it connected? I don't know. Let's look at this a little further. I don't know what I did. Oh, I know what I did. So, okay. So talking about this a little bit further, the fact that there are things that we don't know about and that we're only recently discovering. There's a paragraph that jumped out at me. And it says, in 1998, Zahi Hawass, the guy we were talking about earlier, chief director of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, undertook excavations beneath the main body of the Sphinx at Giza and rediscovered access tunnels to several large, apparently natural, caves directly under the Sphinx. There was evidence of earlier ancient excavations. I've never heard of any caves under the Sphinx. You guys have heard of any caves under the Sphinx? Like, this is crazy. So then I start to dig into this to see if there's any merit and why it's not talked about. And there's a British explorer named Andrew Collins who may or may not be accredited. I didn't look that deep into his credentials, but he says that he's found the lost underworld of the pharaohs. So he takes it a step further. It doesn't say that they're just natural caverns. He says that this is part of a whole system of caves, chambers, and tunnels that is part of the lost underworld that leads to, the Hall of Records. Although I don't know if he goes that far. I think he goes close to that, though. And so he wrote a book called Beneath the Pyramids, and he piggybacks off of some of the stuff that I read from previous explorers that we talked about earlier in my discussion here. And he's saying that that the document records that the two explored the caves for a distance of several hundred yards, coming upon 4 large chambers from which stretched further cave passageways. And so it goes on and on. Not for as much as I would like, but Zahi Hawass said about what Collins wrote, there are no new discoveries to be made at Giza. We know everything about the plateau. And then he said there were no chambers. There's no tunnels. So I can't find anywhere where he publicly comes forth and says that. This is the Ancient Origins page, which is sort of like internet cancer with all these ads and crap, but it has good pictures. It has a nice, concise summary. It's a little woo-hoo, but like I've never seen that, so this person is going to descend under the Giza Plateau. It wasn't easy getting permission to explore under the Giza Plateau. Negotiations to enter the hidden shafts began in 2017. We were initially met with suspicion by Egyptian authorities who wanted to know who we were, what we wanted, and how we even knew about the shafts. They claimed no one had been down there in decades. Initially, they refused our requests, but eventually caved in for a price. In Egypt, all things are negotiable. So they went to an iron-gated entry under the causeway between the pyramids. Inspector handed me the key and allowed me the honor of opening a secret doorway known as the Osiris Shaft. So this is the shaft, and it goes into it. But the part that I wanted to talk about was, because we're not here to talk about pyramids. We have discovered a subway used by the ancient Egyptians of 5,000 years ago. It passes beneath the causeway of the leading between the second pyramid and the Sphinx. It provides a means of passing under the causeway from the Cheops pyramid to the pyramid of Khephren. From this subway, we have unearthed a series of shafts leading down more than 125 feet with roomy courts and side chambers. I don't think I've ever heard about that. And then there's an area that's flooded. And there's probably all kinds of stuff in there, but they can't get to it. And there have been people that have attempted to pump out the water, and nobody's been successful. I don't even think they know where the water comes from. So she goes into her little discovery of these tunnels, and I probably should have read this a little further, but like I said, I got to this point and I was kind of like, okay, we're getting a little tired of the tunnels. But the thing I do want to talk about, because it introduces this topic, but in a completely different way, and that is that there are Bosnian tunnels, and there are rumored to be tunnels in the Busej Mountains, which I talked about way before, back in like, I don't know, episode 13, 14. So there are similarities, and it's even reputed that there's a Sphinx outside the Busej Mountains that's heavily weathered, which some say is just a rock that looks like a Sphinx. So I don't know that it's really been studied, but this is some more stuff by Andrew Collins talking about how he's discovered all this stuff, and he's being suppressed. And what I think has happened with this guy is he went too far to the right. And Zahi Hawass was like, look, this guy looks kind of ridiculous. So he used this guy in a way to sort of avoid talking about anything at all, because he's like, well, there's nothing. This guy's just talking nonsense. So it's a way to sort of let other people talk about what may or may not be there, but in a ridiculous way, while what is really there is not talked about. So it talks more about the tombs, and it's got some links that you can go to, that you can see. But this is really the picture that I wanted to show you. This is the north-south passage beyond the large first chamber, beyond the tomb of the birds. It doesn't look man-made to me, except, I don't know, that one wall looks kind of even, but Giza Plateau of Egypt, the labyrinth of tunnels and shafts under the pyramids. Another article that talks about many people are acquainted with the idea that there may be chambers under the paws of the great Sphinx of Egypt, based on the prophecy by Edgar Cayce, as well as seismic tests carried out by geologist Robert Schoch, and then the other two guys. However, few know that there are a myriad of tunnels and shafts under all of the Giza Plateau. So this reinforces the fact that there are tunnels all over there. Maybe not the Sphinx, but everywhere else. And tunnels that actually lead in the direction of the Sphinx. So, it's evidence, possibly, maybe not. This is more of his, the lost catacombs. He talks about Caviglia. The part that I wanted to share with you is, let's see. Let me see. I'll find it. He also had to pay money to look at the Sphinx. He had to bribe a bunch of people. One clue. Let's see. It talks about another stela, a god. I'm not finding what I'm looking for. I don't want to waste any time. So I think there's stuff here. I think I was heading in some direction, but it seems provocative. This is the pyramid, the Bosnian pyramid, which we'll be coming back to at some point, as well as geological similarities. Not necessarily geological. There's things about it that are similar, supposedly. I actually haven't investigated that at all. Exclusive discovery of new prehistoric underground tunnels at Bosnian pyramid. So I include this also to say that there's stuff to be found. There's still stuff out there. However, this guy, back in whenever he wrote this long ass thing, and it seemed like he's solving the riddle of the Sphinx, and it seemed like it was going to be really good. And I'm reading it, and I'm expecting it to be like phenomenal. I'm including it because there's some cavern looking things there. But at the very bottom, he says, the Sphinx, the guardian of the sacred precincts, lifts his weather-beaten and broken head above ephemeral swarms of guides and travelers who know him not, a monument to the futility of human desires. So that's his conclusion. At the end of everything, he's like, it's futile. Okay, so we are going to listen to some Egyptian music, and we're going to look at some pictures of the Sphinx as I close. And I hope everyone has a great day. I messed this all up, guys. I thought I could just scroll and I can't. Okay. Let's try something else. There we go. So look to the left. Here, I'll make myself a little bigger. You can look at me if you don't want to look at the pictures. Sphinx. Look at how far it's buried in that one. It is rumored that there was a female Sphinx on the opposite side of the river to accompany the male Sphinx. 2 guardians on each side, male and female. All right. So we've come to the end. If you've made it with me this far, you really probably deserve a medal. I've been talking for a really long time, but as you can see, there is tantalizing evidence that there is indeed some sort of something underneath the Giza, whether it's man-made, whether it's natural, whether they're caverns, whether they're tunnels that lead to the Hall of Records. Like, who knows? There are still things to be discovered about the Sphinx. I think that's the takeaway that I have currently from all of this, that there are still things that we can know, learn, understand, and kind of put it all together. I mean, we're never going to know 100% all of it. We're never going to know. And we're also never going to know the stuff that's buried, that's never going to be uncovered, that's just kind of sitting there. But there's still stuff being found. There's still new discoveries being made. Archaeology is still a very lively and exciting place to be. And I hope you've enjoyed this presentation on the Great Sphinx. And you can join me again for episode 37, 38. I don't remember. But I have another episode lined up, and so that'll be coming real soon. All right, guys, I hope you all have a good day.